Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start. So it's my pleasure to welcome you all to the 2018 AGM of the Taxpayers Association. I'm Mark Robbins, President, and our keynote speaker tonight is going to be Widbey Telecom Chief Marketing Officer Chris McKnight, who will touch on what's on the telecommunications horizon for Widbey and Point Roberts. No doubt, or I'm assuming starting with the excavation that's going on along Tyee, and incidentally we initiated the invitation to Widbey to participate tonight before they started digging, so that's just a coincidence that that's going on. As you'll see from the agenda, and I hope everybody picked one up if they're out there. There's also last year's AGM minutes, so especially people who actually attended last year might want to get that one. So we propose to start tonight with the speaker and followed by our business meeting in the second half, and that involves election of directors and some other housekeeping matters under our bylaws. But before I get to the agenda, let me take a moment to thank the Point Roberts Marina Resort for allowing us to use this very nice facility tonight. And sort of a segue and related to that, let me acknowledge with sadness and affection the loss of one of our fellow taxpayer directors, who was also the Assistant Director of Development here at the Marina, Wayne Knowles. You may have noticed the Marina has their flags flying at half staff. His support and leadership within our association was valuable, and probably if it weren't for that relationship, we wouldn't be using the Marina facility tonight. Same goes for the last two AGMs where we were at one part or another of the Marina. We're going to miss his leadership on the Taxpayers Association, and I'm sure the community as a whole. And I just mentioned that there's a celebration of life for Wayne tomorrow at Seabright Farm at 1 p.m. All right, so before I introduce the keynote speaker, could I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. All right, so with no further ado, let me introduce the speaker. We're pleased to welcome Chris McKnight, Chief Marketing Officer at Widbey Telecom. With Chris here tonight are some of our local Point Roberts Widbey staff, whom most of you already know, and I'm going to leave it to Chris to make that introduction. Chris is originally from Bucks County, Pennsylvania, near Philadelphia. Did his undergraduate studies in applied psychology at the University of Pittsburgh, earned an MBA in entrepreneurship and innovation from New York University. He has over 14 years experience in product development, branding, communication strategy, advertising, customer experience design, and sales. Chris and his wife Anna moved to Washington from Los Angeles 2 years ago. They're expecting their first child in September. And he's seriously into woodworking, snowboarding, cycling, and the Mariners. Though there's some lingering loyalty to the Philadelphia Flyers and Eagles, is that right?
Yeah, don't hold it against me.
Yeah, okay. Okay, Chris, welcome.
All right, thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me. Good evening. How's everyone doing?
Good.
Good.
Good to see that. How could you not be doing well when you look out the window and see that, right? So as Mark mentioned, I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of Widbey Telecom, and I drove up today from Widbey Island and was greeted by Mark, Steve, and Bennett. We had a great lunch. I then met with Chief Carlton over at the fire station, and he gave us a grand tour of the island and even invited us into his home to meet his wife and kind of hear her story about how she's telecommuting and working from home. And now I'm here being welcomed with a wonderful introduction to this meeting. And every time I come to Point Roberts, I just get this sense of community and warmth and just being invited in. In fact, Donna and I went over to the golf course about an hour after they stopped serving lunch. And they fired up a cheeseburger for us, said, no problem, don't worry, we'll take care of you. I mean, where else does that happen? What a great community. So I appreciate you welcoming us here, and really honored to be a part of what's going on in Point Roberts. I'd also like to acknowledge all the Widbey Telecom coworkers that I have here tonight. If you're from Widbey Telecom, could you raise your hand? There are so many here that it'd probably take quite a while to do all the introductions, but I do encourage you to reach out to them or say hello to them at the break. Really glad to be accompanied by such a great team here as well. So thanks for being here tonight. So I'll do a little bit of an introduction of myself in a little bit different way in just a second. But here's the agenda that I brought forward tonight. I came up here in February and I got a lot of feedback from businesses and homeowners and folks that are using our services. And what I wanted to share tonight is kind of what we're doing about some of that feedback, talk about some specific projects and some of the work that we did leading up to them. What's interesting is you see some of the construction going on out there today, and that's what you can all kind of visibly see. But there's a lot of work that led up to that, and I wanted to share you what that process looked like and how that came together. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about what's next. So our goal is to always continuously improve our services and our network for our customers and our communities. And there's a couple different ways that we can do that, some of which is going to require a little bit of feedback from the community so we can support you in the way that's best for you. All right, so introduction. It's been an amazing first year at Widbey Telecom. I've been at the company for about a year now. Prior to that, I was at a software company in Seattle and then at a couple of different marketing agencies. But to go along with the lines of community that I mentioned earlier in Point Roberts, Widbey Telecom also has a great community feel, and I'm happy to be there. This next one is a tattoo. Can everyone see that? Does anyone know who that is? The hint is I'm from Philadelphia. It's a previously obscure backup quarterback that just so happened to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Nick Foles?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're a little bit far away from Philadelphia, so I won't hold it against you. But what's funny about this is several of my friends and family members now have new Philadelphia Eagle-related tattoos. Some of them are pretty big. That's an entire leg there. So in Philadelphia, we're serious about sports, and that's something I'm still pretty passionate about. I don't have a tattoo though, so don't ask to see my Eagles tattoo. I've always been into music, and if you recognize that guy right there, before laser eye surgery, I had glasses and played in the marching band. I'm holding cymbals there. Yes, I did play cymbals. Had to wear earplugs, but also like to play the guitar, other drums, and that sort of thing. So that's something that's been part of my life. Now here's the family heritage and history trivia question about me. That lady you see there in the middle, that's my mom. On the right, that's my dad. Now what's really interesting about this is the person on her left is Ted Bennett. Does anyone know who Ted Bennett is? He's the founding father of the 401k plan. He wrote and invented the first 401k plan for Newtown Bank and Trust in Newtown, Pennsylvania. My mom's claim to fame is her secretarial initials are on that very first plan. So if any of you have a 401k plan, you can go trace that all the way back to that first document that my mom wrote with Ted Bennett at the Johnson Companies outside of Philadelphia. So that's just a little kind of fun fact about my family. So on to the agenda about what's going on with Widbey Telecom in Point Roberts. Does anyone remember this last February? Mm-hmm. February 21st, radar was clear, said no rain, no anything like that, and we got 6 inches of snow out of nowhere. I decided because of that weather forecast to drive my 1999 stick-shift Volkswagen Jetta up here. That was pretty fun. But what I was doing up here is I was actually going around with Kelly Wallace, one of our customer service people, to talk to businesses and residents about their feedback about our services. Recently, new to the company, I wanted to come up here and understand what was the feedback. Is the service good? Is it bad? Are there areas we can improve on? And the number one hands-down experience I had was conversations around getting better internet service. Hands down, there were different accounts and different folks that had some specific issues that we were able to address one by one. But this was the biggest thing that I heard. So I wanted to come back today and talk about, well, what are we doing about it? So this is a little bit of a big chart here. There's some text that I'll put up here, but I wanted to share our general process and my approach in working with the team when we get customer feedback. When it comes to our network and services, what we want to do is focus on the customer first, hear what works and what doesn't work. We don't want to put in super laser fast service and charge people more money if they're happy with what they have. On the other hand, if the service is kind of clunky and slow and they need more, we want to look at that too. So what we'll do then is take that into a budgeting process. So Widbey Telecom is continuously improving its network. It's part of our budgeting and capital process every year. We go out and look at the areas where we can build our network better. And then we take that to engineering and we say, well, how do we do it, right? What wires do we have in the ground? What equipment do we have in place? And then, of course, once that plan is in place, the part that you see out there, again, construction starts to happen where we go and build it. The final sort of mile, so to speak, of the process is installation. And what we'll do is create a service that has a certain speed, a certain price. We'll put that into our billing systems. We'll test it and make sure that when it gets to you, the customer, and everything that you experience with the service, that it's really good and it's hopefully really close to what you asked for. So here are some of the details, and I don't know if everyone can read this, but I'll just walk through really quickly in terms of what you see out there today. So this is a project that's been in the works going back to the end of 2017 and the beginning of 2018. So at least since I've been here, I've been getting feedback from the customer service team. I came up here in person, like I mentioned, and we got some really good feedback about some of the improvements we could make. And in February, our technology team, with the support of engineering, updated our core network configuration to basically double the bandwidth in Point Roberts. So that's the big, huge pipe that comes up here and allows us to distribute the service. So we had to make sure that that was bigger if we were going to provide more service. Does that make sense? So we did that kind of behind the scenes. It's not something that you would kind of see in the day-to-day, but that's something we started doing in February. In April, we added additional fiber optic equipment so that we could deliver fiber through the network. So that's a little bit different than DSL service, which is what we've historically had. So we had to add some and make some investments in the equipment. And then in June, one of the things we found in that process is we could actually have a quick win on increasing our DSL service by reconfiguring that network and kind of upgrading it and grooming it and making it just a little bit more efficient. And so for the areas around our office up on Johnson Road, there's opportunities to potentially get higher speeds with the system that we already have. So that was just kind of a quick win that we wanted to do, and that was pretty easy to implement. Now in June and July, here we are, fiber optic network construction on Tyee and Gulf. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. I'll show you a map of the different phases of the project. And our goal as a byproduct of that is by the end of the summer, it's our target to make fiber optic services available to the business corridor here. And then this summer, again, we're going to talk about where to go next, right? So we don't want to rest on our laurels and just kind of call it a day by going down a couple of roads here, although they're very important to the businesses. We think there's an opportunity to do more. Okay, so this is the DSL project map. And so what we did was, our office is the little company logo there, the blue one right on the upper right-hand corner. We were able to optimize our equipment to provide faster speeds in an approximately 4,000 square foot perimeter of our office. So again, that was a quick win. We said, look, we're going to do fiber work, but how can we make our network better right now? So this kind of just visualizes some of the areas where that might be available. I drew just kind of a regular circle here, but it does kind of vary from street to street, as you can imagine, with the different wirings and components that are out in the field. So if that's something that anyone here is interested in, they can talk to Kelly or Leanne about. But that's something that we did. Here is the fiber project map. And really, so far, there's been 2 phases. How many people here knew that our first customer was installed on fiber in April? It doesn't count if you work for us, okay? So our very first kind of prototype, so to speak, customer was the border, right? And so we wanted to provide fiber up to that customer. And that really goes to our philosophy of how we support communities and kind of how we prioritize where we go. We really want to support... What's that?
The big people first, large corporations and governments first.
I'm going to say it's slightly different than that. Is that okay? I think the way that in some ways it's true though, right? So if you think about what makes a community tick, right, it's the infrastructure, it's the schools, EMS, fire, library. This marina itself is a piece of infrastructure that's really important and kind of defines the community. So we really try to cover that base first because we know how important that is to everyone else. And so we started with the border, and now phase 2, which again you see out there, is the business backbone is what we're calling that, and that's really to connect all the businesses and make them available to fiber. Yes?
Hooking up the government offices at the border, does that mean that obviates there was a discussion between Chief Carlton and them about doing a microwave link between their place and the somehow to the tower? Does it obviate that thing? There was a talking plan that was going on.
I don't have enough information to comment on that at this point, but that's something that we can take offline, and I'd love to follow up with you on that. So the question is, okay, great. We're doing these first 2 phases. What's next? So along the theme of businesses and infrastructure, there's a couple areas on the map that we're starting to pencil out with our engineering team and going through the process. It's actually strikingly similar to building a road. You have to do some engineering, budgeting. You have to wait for permits. And there's also a whole strategy to permits, which is really interesting in terms of which ones you can get and how fast. So the 3 areas that we're looking at getting to next are the marina, completing Gulf Road, and then getting to the fire department and school district. We also understand that the water district is potentially going in that area as well. So that to us is kind of like a civic center that we want to reach. Okay, so that's businesses and infrastructure. So perhaps to your question about everybody else, the individual homeowner, what's next for you? So some of you might know that we've already begun to install fiber optic in Widbey Island, and we've actually learned a ton from that process. So that's been something that's been going on over the past year. It's relatively new for us as a business there as well, but we've learned a ton about who wants it in terms of a residential situation. And one of the biggest things that we've learned is that every neighborhood's different, and the definition of a neighborhood's different to people too. That could be your cul-de-sac, that could be a group of 3 or 4 streets, or that could be a larger neighborhood in some people's minds. And there's some neighborhoods that didn't really sign up and buy it. They said, you know, I'm good with what I got. That sounds great. We appreciate that you did it. But there wasn't really a high subscription rate, even though we had made that investment in that neighborhood. On the other hand, there's other neighborhoods that 60% of people took. And to us, that's a pretty high percentage for that kind of new service. And so our goal is to better understand how to continually improve our network and invest our money in the places where it's in the highest demand, so that, you know, if you're sitting here and you want the service, we can get to you faster. That's really the goal with that. What you see on the screen here, and this is really small, so I'll describe what it is. It's a software tool that Widbey Telecom is working with right now that enables us to give Point Roberts its own specific website for people to go on, sign up, and pay down a deposit for the service and say, yes, I absolutely want this service. What's cool about this is you're not kind of alone in doing that. What you're able to see is how many of your other neighbors signed up, and kind of when that thermometer gets to the breaking point where we have enough people where we can say, this is a really smart use of our money, people want these services, and we can kind of deliver that efficiently to the people that need it the most. Does that make sense? Any questions about that?
Just, do you have any, like, how much does it cost? Yeah. What are we looking at as a cost increase versus for basic?
So the way I'll phrase that is, it is more, right? Because it's higher speed, it's a newer technology, you can see the work that goes into that, and so we have to basically get a return on that investment. What I can say right now is we're in the phase coming to the completion of the construction where we're finishing up the pricing. Our goal is always to be more competitive than anyone else in the market and provide a really great value. So I'd have to leave it at that for now, but I would say it is more. but you get a lot more for it. Does that make sense?
Ballpark? Hundreds?
No, I couldn't give you a
Okay.
specific answer on that. But that's one of the things that we hope to do going forward, is to roll this information out faster and communicate more frequently. Because I think if you go back to that chart, there's a lot of stuff that's going on behind the scenes, this whole pricing and product development thing being one of them, that we can do a better job communicating about, right? Any other questions about this?
Yeah.
Yes.
If your benchmark isn't met in a certain time period, do we refund the money?
That's a good question. Yeah, there are components of that, right? So we don't want to hold deposits for a time that's not fair to customers, right? If we're not reaching our thresholds, our approach has been to potentially go out into the community, do marketing events, fun events that kind of raise awareness. And what we've also learned is that there's usually at least a few people in each one of these areas in the map that are just super fans, right? And so what we want to do is help them get out and talk to their neighbors about signing up and kind of joining forces. So there's a couple different ways that we promote that, but it's a fair question. We don't want to hold on to your money forever if it's not going to happen, right? There's one in the back first.
How does that work with Big Gig?
Great question. Okay, so when we launched Big Gig about 2 years ago, and we said, hey everybody, we're going to do this thing, will you go onto a website and tell us if you want it or not? What was different about that, that's actually going to help us do a better job this time, is now we're actually asking for a commitment around the service. The Big Gig indication of interest was, hey, I'm going to fill my name out, I'm going to fill out my address, and press send. So what we learned as we started to talk to the people that did engage our company in that way, is that was everything from an attaboy, that's really cool, glad you're doing that, but I'm not buying it, to people that absolutely wanted it. So it was a little bit harder to sift through that without that firm commitment for the deposit, right? And that helps us find the people that really want it and vice versa.
So follow up on it.
Yes.
When you signed up for Big Gig, you were supposedly guaranteed $70 a month.
Correct.
Does that still apply? If we
Yeah.
signed up for Big Gig, do we have to sign up on the new website?
So you would have to sign up on the new website, but as a company, we do what we say, and so we do honor those. We did end that registration for Big Gig a few months ago, so that's something that would be available to the people that did that at that time period, but we do honor our commitments.
If fiber optic comes to somebody's neighborhood, but a homeowner decides to stick with the DSL that they're enjoying right now,
Yeah.
but the fiber optic is, say, within 1,000 feet, is there going to be any kind of change in the quality of the DSL just by virtue of that proximity? Or do you have to actually connect to it?
I think the simple answer to that question is you'd want to connect to the new service, right? Because that's what's going to deliver it. So DSL is and I'm not a technical person, but DSL and fiber are two completely different. Like you can't just make a connection through some kind of adapter, right? It's two totally different technologies. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so the fiber optic actually comes into the house.
Yeah, it'll come to the side of the house and it'll
Okay.
connect to your house in a new interface. Yep. So I'm just going to buzz through a couple more of these slides so I can finish, and there is time for Q&A at the end. So there's a bigger picture thing that we're really trying to do at Widbey Telecom, and that's to partner with communities to seek funding. So there's really, I don't necessarily know if it directly equates to speeds, but there's kind of three ways that we can continue to improve our network. There's the work that we're always going to do as a company with our capital budget and the funds that we have to continue to improve the network. There's the opportunity to do what I just mentioned, which is to have people sign up and really show an indication that they want to have the service. That kind of gets the ball moving faster because we know where the customers are and we can plan to get it there. And then there's a bigger picture. Ports, governments, federal and state agencies all have grants ranging as small as $5,000 for just a community matching grant, all the way up to significant funds for providing broadband in what they consider rural areas. So Widbey Telecom really views itself as an equal partner in the community with that. We bring the engineering, construction, budgeting, and know-how and a proof point that we've already done it in the community. And where we want to work is with community leaders to go out and make those connections with these types of organizations. Of course, ports are able to raise funds through bond issues. The USDA has very low interest rate loans that might be appropriate for some applications. And then one that you don't see here is NTSC, which is our Rural Broadband Association, and that's where you get, I just saw something that might be appropriate for even just funding for a library of up to $5,000. So there's a lot of areas that we want to reach out to you and say, let's work on this together. And again, we can bring that research, engineering, the proof point to say that we can get it done to strengthen our applications and things like that. Now, more questions? Yes.
Kind of a two-part question.
Sure.
Do you have a budget to donate services in the small communities that you serve? And if so, would you consider donating fiber to our new library?
Great question. So I'm going to answer that in a couple different ways. So actually this orange line right here, the endpoint on my unofficial map here is actually the library. So that goes in line with the whole community resources thing. So we want to get the library basically fiber ready. Now the month-to-month service might be something where we could work on a grant, but something I'm going to do is give you my business card because we also have a philanthropy team. Sorry, I'm walking in front of the camera here. That does do some smaller size donations that might be appropriate for that, and some of that is services in kind as well.
If so, how would you go about doing it?
If you contact me, I'll get you the link. There's a form, that group has a charter and a process for awarding those funds every year.
Thank you.
Yes.
I had a question on how you're feeding this system. Is it coming over the microwave link and then you're converting them at your station, the microwave to fiber optic signal at that point?
It is not. So it's coming from a fiber optic backbone wire.
So that wire is running, where are you getting it from? Out of Canada or all the way back to Widbey Island?
To tell you the truth, I don't know the exact location of it.
The answer to that question is yes. So both. It goes out submarine and terrestrial through Canada. So there's two.
Yeah.
There's actually two paths that it can go out on. And what's really interesting is this redundant. So if one of them is hit, the other one automatically picks up the traffic, which actually did happen, and no one even knew that it had happened to that submarine cable. So a lot of work went into that to make a very robust, dependable system, and just an interesting little fact there.
Very cool. Thanks.
So does that mean that you're connected to the fiber optic system that was put in, that came through Canada and runs across the border and then goes out the water here? You're connected to that system?
Yes.
Wow.
But there's two. It goes through the water and through Canada.
Gotcha.
So terrestrial and submarine.
Okay.
Cool. Thanks for filling in. Yes, in the back.
You mentioned that this coming down Gulf would come to the library. We just opened a new library this past week,
Yes.
which I hope it's coming to that one and not the old one.
Well, they're next door, right?
Yes.
They are next door, but
Yes.
I presume that there's a stopping point which doesn't go beyond.
We're going to go to the library that now is going to have books in it and computers. I think that's the goal, right? Yes. Perfect. Thank you for asking that.
But only curbside, right?
Yeah, and then we hook you up once we figure out how to get the service inside. So,
Fun stuff.
yeah.
Hooking it up, splicing it.
Yeah.
Neat.
Any other questions? Yes.
I had Brent come to my house and work on my internet service because I'm really slow because I'm the furthest I can get
Yes.
from the center. I'm not interested in the fancy stuff, just basic, and just want to watch a movie once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I was having trouble, but Brent did an awesome job. But I was wondering, do you have a minimum that you try to give those basic customers of upload and download, and a guarantee for that, so people can be more aware of what they should be getting? There was some corrosion in one of my connections because I'm on the beach
Okay.
with the salt, and I wasn't aware of how fast I should be. I was
Right.
wondering if you know upload, download, your minimum that you should be supplying to us basic customers.
That's a great question. So, yeah, it's true. As you go further out from where our office is, it's a little bit harder to push the speed out on the DSL lines. I guess the best way I could answer that is to review your bill with one of our customer service folks, Kelly or Leanne, to see what you're getting and then compare that to what you're seeing. Tying this back to our capital projects and improvements, we have the same issues on Widbey Island, right? So the further you go out in the network, there's always areas where someone's going to have the lowest speed. What we're trying to do is keep ourselves up to federal standards, and that really drives our capital planning. So every year federal standards go up, and in fact we know that the minimum that they're going to prescribe over the next 5 years is about 25 megabits per second to be considered broadband. And we're really looking seriously at that and trying to get everybody on our networks up to speed. We think that's a really good benchmark. Again, that's something that takes place over years and through
You're
this
talking
project.
down.
Yes.
What about
That standard is up to 3 megabytes. Up
3?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, my question's about emergency preparedness, but I want to preface it by saying there's other options for internet here, I guess, you know, Delta Cable or whatever. But I want to say that the main reason that I picked Widbey the whole time is because it employs locals, actually. I'm into that kind of localism, and also I feel that there's someone there that if you actually need it. One time there was during that winter storm, the bank was closed, and I didn't know who to find out why or whatever. So I phoned Widbey and I couldn't get through, and eventually I found out that it was closed because of the weather. But that was when we couldn't directly phone the office. Now, since then, I think there's an option that you can press to speak to the office. But I just wanted to say how important that is to be able to speak directly to the office. Widbey often knows a lot of stuff that's really going on in this town, the people there, that others actually don't. So they're kind of a link for, emergency information. And so my question is, so that's just gratitude. And then my question is, do you have an emergency preparedness strategy or anything to talk about that?
What I can comment on is, as I mentioned earlier, we talked to Chief Carlton quite a bit about his needs and his goals for preparedness around the community. I can't talk specifically about any projects on that account, is how we would look at that. But we do interface with him quite a bit for that reason.
Thank you.
Yes.
You mentioned on the screen flexible service agreements. Is that referring to the variations in bandwidth that would be available, or and for some of us that live in, to clarify my question, some of us live in areas that the streets are not heavily populated and are unlikely to reach those kinds of thresholds that you were talking about, but still want to get improved service. So what is it that will be offered to us? Do you have various bandwidth options for us to choose that don't involve fiber?
Our goal, like I mentioned earlier, is to improve the existing DSL service we have where we can, as well as to build fiber. Now, every time we're engineering a new project, we're going to be looking at the cost of building new fiber, which we think is something that is going to take us into the next 50 to even 100 years. So we're looking at that in terms of the longevity of the asset that we're building for the community, versus just using our existing DSL. So it's going to be a case by case, but we're always looking for quick wins on how to improve our DSL speeds, and that was one of the projects that I mentioned as well. It's going to depend on where you live is the short answer.
Okay, but for those of us that don't live in a place that's likely to get fiber, because the street's not something that's got a lot of houses on it, what is it that we can do to get improved service?
I think we would want to improve your DSL then.
Okay. and then there'll be options for higher bandwidth available to us.
That's our goal. Yes.
Two things. It's my understanding that we cannot right now call our local office directly from our phone. It goes to the Widbey switchboard and then to them. I tried to call them and they said, no, you can't do that anymore. That's number one. Number two, we've asked and we've been told no, but I still don't accept that we couldn't have a very easy system for dialing star and then the last 4 digits just here.
Yes. Yes, I appreciate that. I believe, have we changed the direct calling? So now everybody in Point Roberts is calling the Point Roberts office. And that's recent.
Oh, okay.
So that's been within the past few months, correct? So we did make that change.
What number did you say?
Can you clarify that?
945-1122.
Okay.
Sure. So a question about that?
So I thought it was still going to the Widbey office.
No,
But it's not.
No, now it's going directly to,
There was a period of time where it was going down and would be back, but that has changed back now, so you're getting these local folks.
oh, and then there was a follow-up question with the 4-digit dialing.
Yeah.
So 4-digit dialing is something that we explored in earnest, and there was quite a bit of engineering, billing, accounting, and technical things that we would have needed to do that. What we felt was that it was really going to just lead to additional costs and be something that would add additional complexity overall. So that's kind of where that landed.
So instead we got 360 plus?
Yeah, and by the way, unfortunately, I mean, if you want to dial less numbers, now that's the national standard. And so we try to follow standards to improve the efficiency of our business. So. Yes.
So it's discussing network architecture and topography is as you build out some fiber, it's at least technically possible to add a DSL, twisted pair link in nodes closer to different people's, different regions of Point Roberts. Maybe not 100 of them, you might add 10 of them or something like that as your fiber gets to that neighborhood. And so the DSL that's local could go to that node instead of going back to the central office, and that would add a lot of performance.
That's what I was
to
asking.
people. Because I'm correct in saying that the DSL's biggest limitation is that it's really kind of almost a radio frequency thing, and so the longer the wires, the more typically the performance degrades a little bit, like any radio signal, even though it's going through wires. So this would mean that everybody's wires would be short because they could go into these fiber optic driven nodes instead.
Right, and I'm somewhat familiar with that because I've had conversations with some of our engineers. What I would say is that there's a lot of different options to improve the network, and some of them could be, fiber or DSL. So hopefully I didn't confuse anybody on that. Sorry. Any other last questions before I? Yes.
Some of us have concerns about 5G being rolled out by big telecom.
Okay.
And I'm wondering if there's any ideas maybe on a more community, of something that might benefit the community more than that. If there's any alternatives in mind.
I think the way that I would answer that is that these projects that I'm sharing with you today are really our focus right now. We're always looking for new technologies, and I know that 5G is something that's out there, but right now these are the projects in the direction that we're going in.
So any 5G that's done wouldn't be done by Widbey, it'd be done by these outside big telecom companies, or unless we can come up with a local alternative?
It's something that I can take offline and discuss with you some more, but right now these are the plans that we have. Does that make sense? Sure. Okay. You gonna get me off the hot seat?
Yeah. Well, all right, let's have a round of applause.
I have business cards up here if anyone wants to contact me. This is also my email address here, chris.mcknight@widbeytel.com. Don't hesitate. I'd love to hear from you and answer any other questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Yep.